the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, so really my work is with P to 12, but I've only been there for about 5 years, and prior to that I worked with the Learning Disabilities Association of Nova Scotia. I was the executive director there and also did work with our adult programming, so I'm pulling on some of that experience to share with things today, but I think it's always really helpful to know what we're doing in the public school system in terms of supporting those learners who've been identified as having learning disabilities and really maybe haven't been identified but are facing challenges accessing the curriculum. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the work that we're doing, generally speaking from kind of a first wave curricular standpoint, and then I think Tammy's going to get more into some specific strategies that you might be able to take away. I mean, so many students in P to 12 and in university, college, and then beyond in adult learning programs have been told that they have a learning disability and that means they can't learn. And so now you have them and you're trying to change that perspective. And there's some really powerful, easy things to say, just even in terms of how you speak to them about their challenges, how they, the praise around focusing on process as opposed to that fixed kind of final, you have a learning disability, that means you can't do this because. It's just some subtle changes that you can make in it, just even your language. An excellent book to have a look at is by Peter Johnston, Opening Minds. And I'll pass it around, you can have a look at it. And then he has a new one out called Choice Words. And Choice Words is how our language affects children's learning. So this one, Choice Words, is more focused on language. So language is a teacher's most powerful tool. In this unique book, Peter provides instructive examples of the apparently ordinary words, phrases, and uses of language that are pivotal in the orchestration of a classroom, grounded in the study of, so it's grounded in research and so on and so forth. The other thing about Peter, so you can get those books out of the library, he's coming to Nova Scotia in August, so if you're interested in that, I don't have the dates, but you can email me and I can pass that along. All right. So now I'm just going to briefly touch on something called Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Have people heard of that before?
I just wanted to ask the same question. Who in here has either heard of or put into practice some UDL principles? Heard of them?
Heard of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and definitely it's I think a movement within the community college,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah, so there's been a lot of work done in the community college in terms of developing their curriculum based on UDL principles. In the public school system, it's something that we're starting to introduce in Nova Scotia, but definitely in school systems within the United States, it's provided for within policy, and in other boards across Canada and other school districts, UDL is really becoming a large part in how they develop curriculum. So I'll pass it, well, at the end I can pass around a book, and that CAST website is really where you'll find the most around UDL, and it's something that you can use when you develop your lessons and programs with your students. So the primary principles around UDL, and I'll get into a little bit of the background, this might not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, but it provides a different means for representation, so the what of learning, when you present new materials to your students and your learners, multiple means of action and expression, so the how of learning, and provide multiple means of engagement, the why. So we'll get into, and I'm sure even though you maybe haven't heard the term UDL, it's something that you're already doing in terms of differentiating your instruction. But it's a little bit different in some of the pedagogy. So we're going to talk a little bit about how it can meet the diverse learning needs with your students, reduce barriers to learners, or learning for learners with diverse needs, and it has benefits for all learners and all students. Some people would say that UDL, they think that when I start talking about that, it means specifically technology and that we're coming in and loading up every classroom with iPads. Universal Design for Learning is beyond technology, so there is a lot of technology that can support a UDL approach, but it doesn't mean that every student needs an iPad or an iPod or a smart board in every classroom. So where did it come from? Universal Design for Learning was based on universal design, which is really a term that was used in architecture. So an architect coined the term. His name was Rob Mace. And when he was talking about it, he was looking for universal access to buildings. So making buildings accessible for everybody and not doing it as a retrofit. So not going into a building, realizing that a new employee was going to need a wheelchair or a ramp and then putting the ramp up onto the building. It was going to build every building so it was accessible right from the get-go. And some of his things that he was noticing from that perspective is the ramp benefited many more people than the individual in the wheelchair. How many of you, like, just think about, if you can take a couple of minutes to think about the last 24 hours, can you think of any kind of adaptations that you maybe used in terms of accessibility to buildings or information that maybe you benefited from that weren't designed for you? Yeah, I think on my way here today, I was leaving my building and a delivery, the courier was coming in and he had his hands full, so I hit the button for the wheelchair access. And so that was something that wasn't meant for me, definitely wasn't put in our building to help the courier, but it's something that benefited all of us. Can you think of any other examples like that of things that maybe were designed for a specific use but now have a broader benefit to society? Or
I had McDonald's this morning for breakfast, I have to admit.
yes.
And there was a little girl in the washroom with her mom, and while she was trying to dry her hands, there were actually two dryers, one up high, one down lower. The lower one was obviously put in for wheelchair accessibility. However, it fit that little girl perfectly.
Yeah.
Mom didn't need to boost her up to dry her hands, nor did she have to stand on anything, she just did this. And her hands got just as dry.
Yeah. I was involved a couple of years ago with Liberated Learning. It's a tool that has been developed at St. Mary's University, and now it's being used, IBM's involved in, it's used in universities across the world, actually, unfortunately not St. Mary's anymore, we lost funding here, but it's being used in other parts of the world. But it was a tool that was designed for individuals with learning disabilities, and what it was live captioning, so the individuals didn't have to take notes, the professors or the instructors' lectures were being captioned, and then the notes were edited and printed off so those individuals could either have them printed or emailed to them. What we found when we did studies afterwards and observing is it wasn't just the student, well actually, I should back up, it was designed also for individuals with hearing impairments. So those individuals who were deaf or hard of hearing, rather than having a live person doing the sign language, they could read it on the screen. So what they found when we observed is the majority of the students were reading the screen, not just the students who were deaf or hard of hearing. The majority of students were accessing the notes, and it allowed for them to free up having to take notes. They were able to participate in the class in a different way, and it was a benefit for all. The same thing now with when you captioning in TV, when you're watching TV. I know when I'm at the gym on the treadmill, I'm reading, and I make it sound like I'm at the gym on the treadmill all the time, but those times that I am, I benefit from reading it. You know, there's all kinds of things that are out there now that we're benefiting from that maybe weren't designed for us, but are increasing access, and because of that, we're all benefiting.
When I worked for Canadian Paraplegic Association, Lockie was one of my mentors and supervisors, and he tells a story about universal design. And he's a wheelchair user. A friend of his accepted a new position in a government building. The first day he goes to this new government building, his manager is giving him a tour. Here's the accessible washrooms, here's this. And the new staff member says, great. Stops by a fountain. Goes to, get a drink and can't reach it properly. The manager is very upset with this, waits till the new staff member leaves, then puts a request in to have the water fountain dropped. So the new staff member comes back next day, sees this whole water fountain blocked off, and it's then blocked off for weeks. It's finished and it's dropped down. The manager brings him out, see, now you can access the water fountain. And he said, all you had to do was give me some cups. Universal design for learning doesn't mean you have to retrofit everything. Sometimes it's thinking around the solution that fits everyone. If someone had asked him what would help you access this fountain, he wouldn't have said, drop the fountain. He would have said, give me a cup.
Yeah.
That's what makes sense.
And that ties into the whole iPad thing. Because you go into a school and they think we're not getting iPads for every student. It doesn't mean it has to be high tech. There's a lot of low tech stuff. And so these are just some examples of things like, curb cuts. I can talk about that just on Tuesday on the way home from the hospital. My daughter benefited from the curb cut. So these types of things. And the other, the minivans now that you kick underneath and they raise up, that's something that benefits so many people. So really, it's an intentional approach to design, universal design, anticipates a variety of needs, broadens usability, more economical, definitely more economical to build these things in first than to go back and retrofit, and respects human diversity, and not just respects it, but values and celebrates the diversity that's out there in our communities. Okay, so UDL builds on those ideas and those principles in terms of, instead of making physical spaces accessible, we're talking about making curriculum accessible. Because right now we know many curriculums in P to 12, university, and many other learning environments on the job and in upgrading situations, the curriculum puts a systemic barrier for many, many individuals, whether they're English language learners, whether they're individuals who are dealing with mental health, physical health issues, individuals with learning disabilities. There's built-in many systemic barriers in how we present curriculum. And it really allows us to address and be more flexible in how we assess and measure students' learning. So this is a cartoon of a man at the desk, and there's different animals there. We have a dog, a seal, fish, elephant, and he's saying, for a fair selection, he's talking to the fish in the fish tank. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Everybody please climb that tree. I mean, really, that's it. But it's not so far-fetched. We know it's not. We know how many students with learning disabilities, even to be diagnosed with a learning disability, we have to do a psychoeducational assessment and have them complete tests that we know are challenging for them. And so then they end up with an IQ score that's really not representative of what their ability is. They're told that, and then we get into that fixed mindset thing. So really, we have a long way to go, but at least we're starting to have some discussions around what we're doing. Stephen Hawking, imagine, I can't imagine anybody would have done this, but I'm sure at some point early on in his schooling, it was thought that he wasn't going to be able to take a pen and paper test, and so therefore he wasn't really ever able to demonstrate what he was capable of. And he talks to that in one of his books. So again, it's considering the needs of the broadest possible range of users from the beginning. That's the difference. If you hear the term differentiated instruction, and that's something where we go in and we look at students' learning styles and what we might be able to do, what adaptations we can make once we already have the curriculum in place. That's great, and that benefits many people, but as you know, as teachers, if you have 10 or 20 individuals that you're working with and you have to go back and do adaptations, it's time consuming and it's hard to really make them be something that's valuable, rather than structuring our curriculum right from the onset. It takes a lot of time initially, but it does get easier, and there's tools out there to make it easier. Then it's something that you don't have to do retroactively. Okay, can we do one more 4-minute? I'm going to give you a 4-minute blurb that explains UDL a little bit better than I did, and then I'll show you the website. And I'm just going to show you really quickly, take you to the website, so you can get a sense of what it can do for you. Oh, Tammy. What Tammy can do for me. Yeah. So it's the UDL guidelines, and those 3 areas that they talked about, so the representation, engagement, and action. How do I scroll? Okay, I got it. I'll look at this right.
Register down about this one.
Right. So say you want to look at provide multiple means of representation, and you want to look at perception or language. One would do language, expression, and symbols. That would be something. Click on that. There's a drop-down menu. It gives you examples of different ways that you might set up your lessons in your program. It talks about different elements. So you can click down, and it is really, I know right now you're probably not getting much out of it, but it is really user-friendly. It's definitely something to look at. It gives you examples of language, examples of ways how you might do this within your own lessons, and how you can set things up. So I think it's worth going to look at. And I'll just close with this slide. Clearing a path for people with special needs, clears the path for everyone. So if you can see the custodian is shoveling the steps, and the man in the wheelchair, or the youth in the wheelchair saying, no, he says, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, I will clear the ramp for you. And he says, but if you shovel the ramp, we could all get in. So that's kind of the premise behind setting this up so everybody benefits. So go to the website. There's that Summer Institute. I'll pass this book around, and I think now Tammy's has some more kind of hands-on things that I think tie all this together.
Any questions before I'm gonna, mine's all hands-on pretty much, so. Questions around UDL though? Although we do have, in disability services, we have someone who works with us and within curriculum. So this person's job, literally, Jody Woodrow, she's got married, her job is literally to look at all the curriculum and the curriculum outcomes and figure out how to put the UDL in there. So rather than retrofitting everything after the fact, for example, you guys in the classroom having to make all the changes, she's actually working with the curriculum consultants to make sure the outcomes are what are accessible. And then as things are determined how the person meets the outcomes, there's a lot more flexibility. So this is actually huge in Ontario, Alberta, and a lot of the universities in the States, and they've been doing it for a very long period of time. So it's not a new theory or a new concept, and it did start in architecture. We tend to find that a lot of the things that benefit students with disabilities were created for them. Just like a lot of the technology that we use, Dragon, for example, was created for doctors. So they could transcribe their notes after they meet with us in their doctor's offices. They didn't have to sit there and type. They created the Dragon program, so they basically sit there with a microphone and dictate it in. And that's what Dragon was created for. After the fact, it was retrofitted for students with disabilities. So, any questions around UDL? They're thinking it's all theories.
Yeah.
So, with you in mind, what I basically have done, and I'm going to apologize now, I very rarely ever print and hand out handouts. There's a reason for that. One is because I don't like wasting trees, and the other is I don't like wasting paper. But I don't know what you do with these after you go back. That's one of the issues that I have. So there's not enough for everybody of all the different handouts. What I thought we'd spend some time doing is exploring different ways to help people get and stay organized. Because what I hear from a lot of you is that students come and go. They come in for 2 or 3 days at a time, they might leave for 5 days. Then they come back in, they don't know where they left off. Or they come for a month, and then you might not see them for 6. I know in my ALP classroom, that's a huge problem. So what are some things we could help the students build in that make them accountable for their own learning and make them able to track it? Not just what I did today, but what I actually plan on doing next week or next month or next year. So a lot of the things that I want to talk about and we're going to actually get a chance to play with are around organization. And they're just basically tips and tricks. Basically, someone at your table to hold up what I've thrown on there and explain what it is. She's making you work. I know. Scary, isn't it? What have you got? This table over here has some great stuff. What do you have right there?
Okay, it's a goal plan.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just target dates, goals, and
Okay.
what the goal is.
So you start by listing what your goal
First
is.
step, next, what's the third step, next, final.
So basically it takes a large goal, so let's say don't even think about it being a course. Think about it being a unit or a particular outcome you want the student to meet, and then breaks it down step by step, and you can then put in key dates. That was created in Inspiration. That's one of the ones that are built in as a template. The great thing about it being electronic is when the students don't meet the goals they set, they can just backspace it out and set new goals. And that's a nice way for students to keep on track. I print them off, and students also use them in their portfolios.
I have a question, like all these resources where there's not enough, like, can you have access to them?
Sure, I can send you all the links. Yeah. Or you can just take them and make copies or borrow from somebody else. Okay. Another table, what have you got?
I got a calendar here.
Okay. Any idea where it might have come from? Does it look familiar, like it was created in a specific program or
Word
anything,
or
anything
Excel?
cool about it? It's probably a Word one.
Yeah, I know it doesn't say where it came from, but
Okay.
you could kind of customize where you were gonna, like, what you wanted to achieve,
Mhm.
put your goals, like, I hope by the 23rd to be able to multiply 2-digit numbers.
Right. And in the top left-hand corner, there's a little space there, so this is also electronic, where you can sort of write out what your goal is,
Right.
and then put actually in the actual dates what your goal, what date you want to have it accomplished by. Good. What else do we have in our table? What else have we got?
I have to-do lists, and this one is broken into phone calls, errands, correspondence, projects, and miscellaneous tasks. That, I like lists.
Anyone else a list fan? For those of us who are post-it note fans, I have some cool ideas with those in a little while. I have a confession. I have serious stationery issue. The Staples in the Valley, they know me by my first name. And I think that they call me when all the clearance stuff goes on sale, because they know. That's where I get my resources for my own classes. Okay? What's this table have?
Another calendar, set of calendars where I guess people keep track of what they have to do in the month.
Okay, in this one, it's got some options across the top for different activities too, doesn't it?
Yeah, fun activities, school trips, arts and crafts, birthday party, library, dance and music, so that would be the fun calendar.
That's definitely a fun calendar. Again, customizable, so you can go in and put in by subject, or if it's something that the student wants to use to help track things at home, that's an option for them as well. Did you get another calendar there too?
Yeah, the other calendar has the monthly calendar, and then down below it is broken into daily time slots.
If I were to let you choose so far the calendars that you saw that would work for you, which one would you choose, do you think? Oh, she's pointing out that.
That one.
Okay, why?
Because if I was organizing my days, I would rather know something. And
Okay.
have everything detailed rather than just today I have to also go to a dentist appointment.
Okay, I'm a girl who needs it by not by minute, but by half hour at least. So not only in my to-do lists do I have it broken down by task, but I then have it broken down, and I tend to take the most difficult things for me, they go right first thing in the morning. When my concentration is strong, there's less distraction in the work environment, and I know I'm not going to take as many breaks when I get bored. So the most difficult things I have to do during a day, I put in the morning, so I would automatically block that morning off, and that's where they would go. What does this table have?
I have a flow chart for personal goals, main goal, objectives I need to meet, and to achieve my goals I need to, and then there are dates, actions, results, so
Okay.
it's just whatever.
So a little different way from setting up goals is the one over here, which just has the action and the date. This breaks it down into objectives, how you're going to meet it, so you can put some details in. Good. And yet another.
And this one here is mostly, it's a daily grid where the person would list any assignments and or things that they need to remember.
If you were to think of a theme, what theme do you think I might have been going with when I printed off?
Organizing.
Yeah, 6, 7 different types of calendars, a couple of different flow charts. Is organization an issue for your students?
Yes.
What kind of problems or challenges do you see?
Well, they often get interrupted by just life events. You know, the kid gets sick, or,
Mhm.
you know, the bus is late, or it's a snow day, or.
What happens when those interruptions occur?
I think, with my experience, is it causes them to be less likely to come back. We had, I think, 3 Wednesdays in a row. And
I think it was every Wednesday this
Yeah.
winter, we had a
and
snowstorm.
we kind of lost a couple of people there, because they were just like, okay, I haven't been in a month now.
And motivation almost goes down when you're not there, right?
The momentum.
Well, I haven't been there, so what's one more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when I go back, they might say, where were you? And then I won't feel really great about myself, right? Or I don't know where I left off.
I'll be behind.
I'll go to be behind because I'm comparing myself, or they think they're being compared to everybody else.
Or we had one guy who violated probation, so he missed a couple of weeks.
I would think, yeah.
And
that
that
would-
was again,
But that's a good excuse.
it's an excellent excuse.
One of the issues that we find is when we call the learning is interrupted, for whatever reason, if they're able to track on a day-to-day basis what they're doing, first of all, they know what they're doing because they can see it. So these calendars and agendas aren't just for weeks. So I don't know if I have my agenda with me, I think it's in my hotel room. But literally, not only do I have my to-do list, but then I check it off as I go. That's a skill I was taught. For those of you who don't know, I have ADHD, and I would say my mom knew when I was in diapers. Because I was the kind of child who, a commercial came on, and I would come running into the room and stand there and do this. And then watch it, and then for the rest of the day, walk around singing J-E-L-L-O. I couldn't remember basic facts of some things, but put it to music and rhyme, and introduce me to it, and it stuck. So she knew from a really young age I was going to learn very differently from my older brother who has a photographic memory. He could see it once and automatically remember it detail for detail. So in elementary school, I started using an agenda. Not the same way a lot of people do, so it wasn't just to mark stuff in. I would put class, so if it was English, I'd write the letter E. I would put P for page number, so I would write down what we did that day from what pages, and then H for homework. So I basically created my own code, for lack of a better word. Then I would be able to, that night, go back and say, here's what I did in English, this is what I had for homework, and when I finished it, I just clicked it off. Not a skill a lot of students are coming out of high school with nowadays, at least not the ones who I see. The ones who I see expect you to sit there and tell them where they left off, where they have to go now, and then what they're going to do before they come in next time you see them.
So true.
I'm not a hand holder. I'm the most patient instructor a lot of my students will find, but they have to learn that skill. I provided you with a variety of different samples of calendars to help you see that not one is going to work for everybody. And sometimes you have to say, which one are you automatically drawn to? Which one makes sense to you? Maybe my coding system of E for the name of the subject, P for the page number, and H for homework isn't going to work. But if this is the end result, we need you to be more organized and know where you are from day to day, then how do we get you there? If you've told me it's a problem, how do you help the student fix it? Is it then recording their voice into their phone? Is it writing it in an agenda? Is it using a calendar? What is it? Well, chances are it's not just one thing. And there's going to be trial and error. But if the student is interested in changing the behavior, and that's where that whole motivation piece comes in, then they'll figure out a way to make it work. One of the other things that's really important to do is you don't want to start a new routine. You don't want to create a brand new routine for the students. What you want to do is you want to build out a routine they already have. But you oftentimes have to show them what that routine is. So I'm going to turn this off because first of all it's loud, second it's hot. There's heat coming off this puppy. You could just probably close it and it'll shut down on its own. So tell me about when your students come into your building, they come into the room where they're going to be, what do?
Sit down and do target.
They sit down and what?
Do target. We do the target every week.
What's the target?
Out of the newspaper, the word puzzle,
Oh.
the routine.
So they,
Because I've got people trailing in at different, I've got like about 3 different sets of people that come in. And so although my class starts at 8:30, not everybody's there until probably 9:15. So to do any other big group activities. Okay. Anyway, so we do the target together.
okay. So everybody, no matter what time they come in, starts and does the target.
Yeah, it jumps in wherever we are. If we're going over people's words that they have, they jump in there and we say, okay, so what did you have? Actually, the latest one does it in the car. She comes with community rider.
So she has it done?
She has pieces done. She's got, like, target, you find as many words as you can, right? So she's got her list of words, we've got our list of words we compare, so.
I've never heard of that before, now I'm gonna have to go look at targets.
Chronicle Herald.
Okay,
Chronicle Herald, yeah.
all right. What else do we do?
Yeah.
That's a newspaper.
First thing they do when they come in, okay? Open up the newspaper.
Get the dictionary.
My students, the only ones that come in, sit down and start working. They pull out their binders,
Yeah.
grab a pen out of their bag, look around for direction from me. And then as I hide in the corner, they have to figure out where they left off so they can figure out where they're going to start today. One of the important things when we're talking about building skills is building into a routine they already have. If they're already sitting down and pulling out a binder, where do you think you're going to put the calendar at?
In front of the binder.
In the front, right? So it's either attached here, or it's, as soon as they open the cover, it's the first thing in there. They have to see it. Then that becomes part of the routine. I'm looking at the calendar, then what? I have to review what I did the last time I was here. Part of a routine. I review it, then I can open my books and go back to where I was. Just like you were always told, repetition is key. Eventually you won't have to tell them to open the binder to where they record where they were last time. It will become ingrained. Okay? How many of you do that? back to your grade books or whatever you use for attendance, or figure out where students are at. Is that where you start when you come into the room? Sort of look and skim through and
Yeah.
see who you can expect? Do we model that for our students? Do we tell them that's how we start our class? Why?
Because we're busily looking in your plans, we're not talking out loud, maybe, I don't know.
How many of you consider yourself to be fairly organized? That's not the answer I was expecting from this group. Everybody was supposed to go me, that's me, I'm organized. Not so organized?
It's not natural, it's a learned skill, but it's growing all the time.
Okay, so who taught it to you?
It was self-taught out of desperation.
And how old were you?
I was not young.
So like after high school years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of the key to adult learning is flexibility, because even if you're organized, your best laid plans could go out the window.
Out the window. Sometimes it just takes a phone call, right, Annie? You're absolutely right. But if you're organized and you have a plan, no matter what else happens, you always have that plan to go back to and figure out what you were supposed to be doing. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have a great memory. So me just having it up here, there's no point. I won't remember it. That's why I have to write it down. And by writing it down, it's repetition and then helps with remembering it as well. That's why the act of me writing it in my agenda is what's important. Then I have a written record to go back to.
I write my daily plan on the board
For you or for them?
for both of us, for all
Okay.
of us, so they know what's coming up. I can go, oh yeah, this is what's next, you know, so.
That's something probably a lot of our elementary school teachers did.
Yeah, I've used it in public school too, and it makes for a lot less stress, because everybody knows what's happening, everybody knows what's
And
going on.
everybody knows what's going to be expected of them that day.
That's good, but I suppose if you're working with a group of people that are at all different levels at a given
Well,
time, that's not
Some
necessarily.
of the items are math, so everybody's working on
All
their
different
own.
areas of
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah,
And I've also seen it done by time slot. You do, where they put like subject 1 in, right? From this time to this time, then break. Then subject 2 from this time to this time, and then break, right?
Well, the only thing I ask for our school to supply me with all the time are the chart paper, like Post-it notes.
Oh, the flip chart sticky
Yeah,
ones.
because we're in a newer building and they've said don't,
Put stuff on.
so I put everything that we're supposed to have done and I'll post them and then I keep track, so if somebody's come in and missed time, then they can go back and see
What they missed.
where they missed.
You had your hand up.
I do a lot of trees that
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
folks. But no, but I don't, I do it for coursework, but, because I do a lot of GED prep too, stuff, so some of that stuff is pretty, you have to constant material, so where they need to know to be, so I find that helpful, because it's like on the wall and they can go back and
They
they know
can
where
take
it
a
is.
picture of it if they.
I've had that happen, that's something
Yeah.
new.
I know, but that's.
They said, wait, let me take a
There's a
picture of
picture of that,
that.
click, and then they have it.
Yeah,
Right? And some of them, if they're especially taking pictures on their iPads, there are some apps now that will then take that picture, that image, and relate it to text. So then they have written words on a page, yeah, and I just love that stuff sometimes, but not all the time. Question? Comment?
Well, just a comment, no, I had started when I was in the public school system, like just planning like a week or 2 in advance and writing that I had to do this, like, that I would write everything, and then I started writing in my preps what I had to do, like photocopies of certain things, and what a difference it made, like, because totally opposite of what it used to be, right? So like just by the fly, like what we have to do today, and it's not, you know, so that really helped, and then I even showed my students, like in career and life management, like that skill, like so they could see, you know, planning in advance, like, because it reduces stress, right?
It
So
does.
it's like,
And it lets people know, it lets you know what you're doing and when you're doing it, but then others can see that you've got a plan, and you've got things you have to do too. One of the things we don't do sometimes is model the behavior that we want them to have. I have a wonderful friend who I teach with. She is even more organized than I am, and she color codes things. But she doesn't talk about why she color codes them. In her head, she has this whole coding system. So the color red represents this, and this is why this subject, everything is red. A little too far for me. But what I've taken from her, of course, stationery, I went out and bought some things. These are life-changing. They are! They're life-changing. Why would they be why are sticky dots life-changing? If you can give me the answer, you get to keep them. Why are they life-changing?
See at a
Keep you
glance.
organized.
See at a glance what it goes with or where it goes.
Explain.
Oh, a big dot might mean, it's, project
She
note.
said it before you. It's categories. But you're absolutely right. Categories of what?
Subject matter?
Importance, subject matter. So if I have a visual issue, red, the color ones might not work very well if I'm colorblind. But if there's students with, or older students, you can use the bigger dots versus the smaller ones. Everything reading related for a particular subject gets
Red.
red for reading. So all my books that I use for that subject get
A red dot.
a red dot. All of the handouts for that subject get,
A red dot.
what else gets red dots? Perhaps if there's videos or CDs that they can pull off a shelf and throw in a computer, they all get red dots. Then when I'm getting ready to hand out handouts, what color file folder are they in, do you think?
Red.
Because then the student associates the subject with a color. They're not necessarily remembering the name of the subject. All they have to do, look for the red.
We're doing red today.
You can also teach them to do the same thing. So as they're organizing things in their binders, they might be using, yes, I know, I have an issue, file folders. Basically, these are portfolios in the proper color. So even as they're putting things in their own binders, they use the same color scheme. So as they're looking at handouts, they have dots on them, then they even know what to put these in. I have an issue with purple, that's why I thought. Okay, so we can color code with dots. Expensive?
Dollar store.
These I couldn't find at the dollar store, so I splurged and went to Burton House. How many of you do it already? How many of you when your students are at a certain place have to go hunting for it? In a cabinet somewhere? Or in a bookcase? Or under a desk in a box? On the floor? Why? Because there's not enough space.
I'm good at bookshelf.
Could you just lay things out in categories? But if you had the dots on them so the student knew what subject they belonged to, even if you got excited and then even wanted to put numbers inside the dots to indicate if it's at, unit 1 or unit 2 or unit 3, or if it's done, if things are done by steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, you could do that with the bigger ones and write on them. Difficult? Time consuming for you? A little bit, probably a lot in the beginning.
But not as much as labeling things.
Fancy labels, or photocopying on colored paper. You don't need to use colored paper. Buy some dots.
feel like though it might even save you time if you're making Word documents like on the computer, just make a red circle on your computer and then, it's something that you just copy and paste in or whatever, and then it's there and you don't really have to worry about it.
But then you need a color printer.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess.
Anybody cheap or can't afford to go buy dots, get a red pen. Put a right circle a dot on there. Right, or a red marker. That all works too. Okay? Other easy ways, these are lovely little fellows. These are post-it note flags, and these are a really great size for when I'm reading. So, I'm going to pick red, because we're talking about, let's pretend red is along the language arts line. Communications, English, whatever we're calling it. As I'm reading through a book, where I've left off in the book, I can take this and mark the exact paragraph or word. So be it. So when I come back in the next time, I don't have to necessarily go back and reread where I left off. I automatically know. That's if you have a book, same book for everybody, or same book per person, right? Communal books, write names on them. Or initials on here, it's big enough. I've done it. I also use this with my agenda. So I have an agenda, basically that has the day broken down by time. Instead of flipping through the agenda to find my page, I have one of these marking off today's date. And at the end of the day, I just take my sticker off and slap it on the next day. So I don't have to flip through it to find it. I just look for my flag, open it right up, and there I go. What are some other ways you can use these?
I use the flags for marking when I'm reviewing work, areas that I want my students to look at.
Mhm.
Flag it.
So they're yours. Any other ways you can think of to use them? These are similar to, these are all paper, basically same principle. These are a little easier to write on. A lot of my students use these when they're reading, when they have questions. So they might grab one of these from the table, slap it on as they're reading something they have a question, write the question on here and then keep going. And then when they're finished, especially if they can't get me at that moment, they just grab me and say, oh yeah, when I was reading this paragraph, I had this question. Because I have a little note here, and now I know what the question is. So that works really well for that. Anybody else use these?
If I've got sets of documents, I tag the top corner, it just keeps.
What do you mean sets of documents?
If I have like a set of readings, like a series of readings, and I have them in sets, so if I have somebody working through a set of readings, I mark their set, and I give them out one at a time so that they don't race through all of them, right? So I have so-and-so, so-and-so, just about it. Oh, thank you.
What are some other ways that you help your students build organization skills? What are some things that you do to help them? I really hope you have the conversation about what skills they have and build on what skills they already have, and don't start from a deficit model about what they don't have, right? So we start by saying, what do you organize well? I'm sorry, anybody who's a mom is starting off with some pretty strong organization skills if they can get themselves to a building to attend a class after their children are already in school. Because they've done a lot of organization before they've ever walked in your door. Because usually they're dressed. Usually they're showered maybe. Usually their children are dressed. And their children probably either have lunch or money for lunch. And their children are out of school. So they've managed to organize a child enough to get them off to somewhere and then gotten themselves somewhere. Oftentimes, and I know they talk about this a lot of times when we talk about skills, they have to identify what skills they have, show them they're already starting off with some. But where are they falling down? So where are your students lacking? Or where are they missing the skills at? You tell me. Where are they missing the organization skills? Are they throwing everything in a bag when they're done, rather than putting it in file folders? Are they losing things?
We were having issues with everybody just leaving everything sprawled out on their desk. So you go, you're like, is this scrap paper? Or we started pre-stapling things, because it's like page 20, page 80, and you're like, oh my gosh, right? And so whereas we didn't want to have to be the ones organizing it for them, because that's freaking time consuming, right? So we, have to give them a rundown, and now we have bins where you pass in work and write if it's complete or not.
Are they color-coded bins?
Yeah, I think that was your idea, it definitely wasn't mine.
In an M&L box that are probably labeled, right?
They're color-coded.
Same thing, same basic principle. What other ways?
Our students, we supply them with their school supplies. So we have binders, dividers, and loose leaf. And the first thing I do is, with the schedule and everything, is they go through and they organize it. And everything that we have hole punchers there, or I get it punched, anything I hand out, and I usually write, I don't color code it, but I write, every handout is like science, biology, handout 5, because it'll go in and I'll date it, so they do. Now, some are better than others, and I have some women in my class who are really mother hens, so if other people aren't organized, they'll go and sit with them and get all their stuff organized in their binder.
And that's a great thing. The only problem is, having been a mother hen for other people, you're not actually, sometimes you're just doing it for them, and you're not really teaching them how to do it for themselves.
Actually, in this case, in the one that I'm thinking of is chronic issue with a couple of siblings from they have a very disorganized life, so it's reflected in everything else. And the woman who helps, she's getting tougher with them about, she said, she'll point to the handout that just gets tossed up. And now they're starting to be much more organized. I don't have to talk to them at all now. But she's helped them, and they are getting better. And they find things more quickly, because you say, we need to go back and talk about this, and they'd still be, and now it's like, because they're afraid Melissa's is gonna say something, they just kind of whip it out, like, so that has, it's helped, but we have the materials to do that, and I don't think in all the communities that they bring their own materials and may not have binders and labels and the things that we have for them, so, but it does help.
I started using these in high school. So when we were in class, would get a handout and there was no hole punch around or no staple around, I had these, so in every subject of my binder, I had my little dividers, but I would also have one of these at the back of that section. So I would throw my papers and handouts and tests and project dates and appointments in one of these, and leave it with that subject. So if I didn't get access to a hole punch, then I still at least knew where they were. A couple of the articles that I was reading through to get ready for today also talked about the people who really have no organization skills using these. I knew I'd get them open eventually. And these are these clear pockets. Now these are the smaller kind, and a lot of the researchers were talking about keeping things together. So if it's a specific subject, and they talked a lot about math. So in their little plastic envelope, they have their calculator, their pencil, their eraser, if it's a protractor set, measure, like whatever they need is in one. The really good people who talked about it then also talked about having a label on it listing what was supposed to be in it. And then if something went missing, you would circle it. And then obviously you might need to go get another one or start looking for it. But so everything math related went in one spot. Although the article was specific to children, I know a lot of adults who could probably still use that basic theory. And at least when they're clear, you can also see them. But this was being talked about for like instrument type things, right? Anything else that you can think of that would help students with the organization or tips and tricks? To-do lists are huge. Figuring out how they want that to-do list set up is really important. So helping them see that a test or a project being due on Wednesday, you need to start preparing for that before Tuesday night at 11 o'clock. If they want to do this at the end, then they have to go backwards and break it down and follow what we call chunking. So break a big task down into small manageable chunks and then plan it out. For some students, that even means planning out how long you think it's going to take to do it. I don't know about you, but a lot of my students don't have time to do 5 hours of homework a night. They can't. They might have 20 minutes. So how are they going to use that 20 minutes to do what needs to get done? Well, they have to be really strategic about what they do and then how they do it. So that might mean helping them figure out what they're going to do in that 20 minutes and then using repetition to keep it simple. I know I'm out of time. I do have some other goodies if people are interested. These can be used wonderfully on desks to keep communal. Pens, pencils, erasers. So if you want some of these things, you can come ask me for them and I might provide them. I want to thank you for being a very captivating audience and laughing along with me, not at me. And hope that you definitely enjoy the rest of the conference. And I will